Helena Morgan entered the luxurious Pierre, New York alone that night. "Who is that woman?" asked a lady in an emerald green dress to her companion. "I have no idea, but it's notable that she doesn't belong to this circle," he replied, barely hiding an ironic smile. In the center of the hall, standing by the head table, Valerie Keller didn't take long to notice her. In her bright red dress covered in gemstones and a glass of champagne in hand, she crossed her arms, tilted her head, and smiled with contempt. "Mother, look!" she said, loud enough for several people around to hear. "I don't remember seeing this woman on the list." Beatrice Keller, the matriarch, adjusted the pearl necklace hanging from her neck and directed a glacial look at Helena. "Dear, I am certain your name is not on our guest list," she pronounced in a soft tone, but one loaded with poison. Helena didn't stop. She walked with a firm step to the registration desk. When she arrived, she calmly opened her purse and took out a cream-colored invitation with gold lettering. "Good evening," she said in a cordial tone. "Here is my invitation." The security guard, a tall man dressed in a dark suit, examined the card attentively. "It looks legitimate, ma'am," he commented after checking the embossing and the seals. "It looks like it," repeated Beatrice, letting out a brief but cruel laugh. "They can't confirm it for sure. This event is exclusive, not an open market." Restrained laughter began to be heard in various corners of the hall. The murmurs grew like an uncomfortable buzz. Several people took out their cell phones to record discreetly. Thomas Keller, the youngest son, raised his without shame and began to stream live. "This is going to get interesting," he whispered with a cynical smile. Helena kept her calm. It wasn't the first time they looked at her as if she didn't fit, but the environment charged with luxury and arrogance was putting her to the test. She breathed deeply and remained upright, with her dignity intact. Suddenly, a waiter passed by her with a tray full of red wine glasses. His steps were firm, accustomed to high-level service, but someone pushed him from behind exactly when he was next to her. The glass tipped, and the crimson liquid spilled over Helena's black dress. The impact was immediate. The wine stained the fabric as if it wanted to mark her on purpose. There was a brief silence, and then an explosion of restrained laughter. "How clumsy!" exclaimed Valerie, covering her mouth with feigned surprise, although her eyes shone with amusement. "Although I suppose she is used to this type of accident." Helena lowered her gaze for a moment to her stained dress. She could feel the moisture sticking to the fabric, but the looks and the laughter around her burned more. Before she could react, Valerie stepped forward with a napkin in her hand. "Let me help you," she said in a falsely kind tone. She leaned toward her, but instead of cleaning delicately, she pressed the napkin hard, spreading the stain even further and ruining the fabric. "Oh, what a shame. It seems I'm no good at cleaning," she added with sarcasm. The laughter exploded again. Thomas focused the scene with his cell phone and murmured, "This is pure gold." Helena pressed her lips together. She knew they had provoked her on purpose, that nothing that happened was a coincidence. However, she forced herself to maintain her composure. She straightened up and held Valerie's gaze without blinking. The security guard took an uncomfortable step forward. "Ma'am, perhaps it would be better if you waited in the hallway while we clarify your presence," he suggested in a low tone, as if wanting to avoid a larger scandal. Helena looked him directly in the eyes. "I have as much right as any of you to be here," she replied with serenity, although her voice had a firm edge that surprised the guard. Beatrice adjusted her pearls and smiled with superiority. "We will decide that when my husband arrives. I am sure he will know how to bring order to this matter." Meanwhile, Thomas's live stream continued to increase in views. More than 15,000 people were already watching the scene unfold in real time. The comments accumulated at such a speed that not even he could read them all, but the smile on his face made it clear he was enjoying the spectacle. The wine had dried a little on the fabric, leaving a dark trail that seemed to scream the shame they were trying to impose on her. Helena remained standing in the middle of the hall, surrounded by disguised laughter, curious looks, and a constant murmur that made the air vibrate. The atmosphere, heavy with expensive perfumes and arrogance, became more oppressive by the second. The security guard insisted with a nervous gesture. "Ma'am, the best thing would be to accompany you outside while we clarify this misunderstanding." Helena turned her face to him and held his gaze firmly. "I do not intend to leave. I was invited, and I have my invitation. I am not going to let you treat me as if I were an intruder." The words resonated with force in the momentary silence. Some guests, surprised by the confidence in her voice, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others could barely contain their laughter. Valerie intervened immediately, without losing the opportunity to humiliate her. Of course, she surely had a cheap copy printed. Nowadays, anyone can forge something like that. The guard raised the card again, unsure. "Mrs. Keller, I've already verified that the embossing and the seals match. It looks authentic." "It looks like it," Valerie repeated with a theatrical tone. "So, are there still doubts?" "No." Helena took a deep breath. "My invitation is real. I don't need to prove anything else." Beatrice raised her voice so everyone could hear. "A woman who enters with a ruined dress, without a companion, without jewelry, intends to make us believe she belongs to this gala. Dear, here it is not enough to bring a piece of paper in your hand." The murmurs increased, and at that moment the guard, pressured by Beatrice's look, tried to take Helena's arm gently. "Ma'am, follow me, please." Helena released herself quickly and took a step back. "Do not touch me," she said, with a tone so firm that the guard froze. "I have done nothing wrong, and I am not going to leave here as if I were a criminal." The gesture surprised many. The murmur turned into a tense silence. Thomas took advantage of the pause to bring his phone's camera closer to Helena's face, seeking to capture any reaction. "Did you hear that?" he murmured, smiling to his followers. "This is getting interesting." Valerie approached with an air of superiority, measuring each step as if she were on a catwalk. "Tell me something," she said, leaning toward Helena, with a venomous smile. "Where did you get this dress? Did you buy it at a thrift store? Don't tell me you thought you were going to go unnoticed here with that cheap fabric." Laughter exploded among several guests, though some lowered their gaze, uncomfortable with the evident cruelty. Helena raised her face with serenity. "My dress does not define who I am, and neither do your comments," she replied without hesitation. The comment didn't make anyone laugh. The murmur died down a bit, as if the words had found an echo in more than one person, but Valerie was not willing to lose ground. "How audacious you are," she countered with a mocking gesture. "Surely you thought you could come find some millionaire husband." An older man sitting near the center table cleared his throat uncomfortably and spoke aloud. "Perhaps we should listen to her. She doesn't look like an imposter." Beatrice turned her head slowly toward him, glaring at him. "Mr. Dubois, we appreciate your opinion, but this is a family matter. We will decide who belongs and who doesn't." The man lowered his gaze and remained silent. Helena noticed how he settled nervously in his seat, aware that he had been publicly rebuked. Helena spoke again with a firm voice. "You have no right to treat me like this. I have an invitation. I came because I was summoned, and I am not moving from this spot just because you think I don't fit your idea of what a guest should be." Valerie let out an exaggerated laugh. "Did you hear that? How funny. She says she won't move." Thomas, behind his cell phone, didn't stop smiling. The broadcast already had tens of thousands of viewers. People commented non-stop, some mocking, others indignant at the way Helena was being treated. Helena felt her phone vibrate inside her purse. She didn't take it out yet, but she knew it was a message from Adrian. The certainty that he was close gave her strength to stay calm. The security guard, still nervous, stayed in his place. The Kellers continued observing her as if she were an improvised show to entertain the guests. Beatrice took a step forward, stroking her pearls. "This is our event. Here we don't need people who ruin the night. I recommend you accept the exit gracefully before this becomes more uncomfortable." Helena breathed deeply. The dried wine on her dress no longer mattered to her. What kept her standing was the conviction that she should not give them the victory of seeing her surrendered. The tension could be felt. No one in the hall was indifferent. Everyone knew they were witnessing something out of the ordinary. Helena raised her chin and said clearly, "I'm not leaving." The words hung in the air, firm as a sentence. The murmur was still floating in the air when the figure of Raphael Keller, the patriarch, appeared at the back of the hall. A serious man with perfectly combed gray hair and an impeccable black suit. His presence alone was enough for several conversations to stop immediately. He walked with the confidence of someone accustomed to everyone obeying him. Seeing him, Beatrice smiled with relief. "Darling," she said out loud for everyone to hear, "you arrived just in time." Raphael approached with a firm step and looked Helena up and down with evident disdain. "What's going on here?" Valerie took the floor immediately, as if she had been rehearsing the scene. "This woman infiltrated our event. She claims to have an invitation, but I am sure it is fake." Helena maintained her calm. "I have already shown my card. It is authentic." The guard again raised the cream-colored envelope and extended it to Raphael. "Sir, I checked the embossing and the seals. They match the originals." Raphael took the invitation and observed it coldly, as if he could detect a lie just by looking. "Appearances are deceiving, and this type of paper is easy to copy." Helena interrupted him with serenity. "My invitation is true. I don't need to convince you of more than that." Beatrice raised her chin, looking at the other guests as if seeking support. "See, she doesn't even know how to address us with respect." An uncomfortable silence ran through the hall. It was then that a middle-aged man, sitting near the drink table, decided to speak. "With all due respect, Mrs. Keller," he said in a neutral tone, "it doesn't seem right to humiliate her this way. She handed over her invitation, and I see no reason to treat her as a suspect." The gesture surprised some, but Beatrice reacted immediately. "Thank you for your opinion, Mr. Furtado," she said with a smile that was actually a warning. "But this matter is none of your business. This is a gathering organized by our family, and we decide who deserves to be here." The man settled nervously in his seat and said nothing more. Beatrice's look had been enough to silence him. Valerie took the opportunity to add more poison. Could it be that she was looking for a little attention? Arriving alone in such a basic dress must be part of some strategy. She's here to hunt for a millionaire husband. Some laughter broke out immediately, though other people looked away, uncomfortable with the evident cruelty. Helena, without losing her calm, responded, "I am here because I was invited, nothing more, and I will not tolerate you continuing to invent reasons to justify your lack of respect." The murmur grew again, but this time it wasn't just mockery. Some whispered among themselves, surprised by Helena's firmness. Raphael raised a hand, imposing silence. "Look, ma'am," he said with a deep voice, This is simple. No one who doesn't belong to our circle enters here, and clearly, you do not belong." Helena held his gaze without flinching. "That I don't belong to your circle doesn't mean I don't have the right to be here." Valerie laughed ironically. "Did you hear that? Now it turns out anyone can enter an event of this level just by thinking they have the right." Thomas continued streaming live, focusing on every gesture, every word. The audience on his stream had exceeded 40,000 people. He smiled satisfied, murmuring to his followers, "This is better than I expected." Helena squeezed her purse in her hands, but she didn't yield ground. The tension increased every second, and although it seemed she was alone against everyone, her firm look revealed that something inside her remained unbreakable. A couple of guests exchanged worried looks. One of them whispered, "This is getting out of control." But Beatrice didn't seem willing to stop. "Dear," she said in a tone sweet and venomous at the same time, "why don't you do us all a favor and use the service exit? That way, we avoid further discomfort." Helena didn't respond immediately. She looked around. The chandeliers illuminated the expectant faces of 200 people who seemed to enjoy the spectacle as much as the champagne. She knew they were waiting for her to give up, to break down. But she wouldn't. "I'm not going out through the service door," she finally said with a clear and firm voice. "I'm not a hotel employee. I'm a guest, and I will stay here." The murmur turned into a more intense buzz, like a ripple on the beach before a storm. Raphael crossed his arms irritably. "Then you had better prepare for the consequences." Helena felt another vibration in her purse. It was another message from Adrian. She ignored it for now. She knew he was close, and that thought was enough to keep her standing. Thomas, amused, focused again on the face of his sister Valerie, who smiled maliciously. "This has only just begun," she said in a low voice, but loud enough for some guests to hear. Helena heard it too, and although the tension grew inside, on the outside she maintained the same upright posture, the same secure look. She was alone at that moment, but she knew that very soon everything would change. Let's play a game for those who read the comments. Write the word brigadero in the comments section. Only those who have reached this point will understand. Let's continue with the story. The environment of the hall was charged. The crystal chandeliers illuminated the tables full of glasses, but everyone's attention remained concentrated on the small circle where Helena stood firm against the Keller family. It was as if the rest of the gala had ceased to exist. Beatrice, with her face held high and a deliberate voice, decided to take the situation further. "Listen well, dear," she said, slowly stroking her pearl necklace. "This is not a place for just anyone. You have already caused enough trouble. The best thing is for you to use the service door." The words hung in the air like an order disguised as courtesy. Valerie smiled satisfied, enjoying every second of the spectacle. "Yes, it will be faster," she added with sarcasm. "That way you don't ruin the night further with your presence." Some guests laughed softly. Others looked at each other with discomfort, but no one dared to contradict the Kellers. The influence of that family weighed too much. Helena, with the wine stain still marked on her dress, took a deep breath. "I am not going out through any service door," she responded with clarity. "I am not a hotel employee. I came as a guest, and I will remain here." The guard looked at Beatrice, waiting for a signal. She nodded slightly. The man approached another step with the intention of forcing the exit. "I ask you to accompany me, ma'am," he said in a low, almost ashamed tone. Helena held his gaze. "I'm not leaving," she repeated with the same firmness she had used before. The guard hesitated, but Beatrice grew impatient. "Do I need to repeat myself?" she snapped harshly. "Take her out!" Helena squeezed her purse tightly. She felt the guard was about to take her by the arm again, and for an instant her heart beat hard in her chest. But before it could happen, her cell phone vibrated inside her purse. That detail gave her back her calm. Adrian was close. Very close. Valerie took the moment to get closer. "You know what the worst part of all is?" she said in a low voice, though loud enough for several people around to hear. "It's that you really think you can fit in here." Helena looked up at her. "I don't need to fit into your standards to know that I deserve respect." Valerie smiled with disdain and turned around, as if the response wasn't worth it. Meanwhile, Thomas continued streaming. His phone showed that the number of viewers wouldn't stop increasing. "Friends, this is historic," he murmured with a smile drawn on his face. "It's not every day a stranger defies my family at their own gala." The comments on his stream accumulated at an impressive speed. Some asked that they leave Helena alone. Others mocked the stained dress. But what became clear was that the situation no longer belonged only to the hall. The digital world was watching. A young man sitting near the stage whispered to his companion, "This is getting out of their control." She felt her worry. "They are digging their own grave." Helena heard part of the comment and felt a slight relief. Not everyone shared the cruelty of the host family. Beatrice, however, remained convinced that she was in control. "I don't know how much longer we are going to tolerate this spectacle," she said, raising her voice so everyone would hear. "This woman is dirtying our family's name with her stubbornness." Raphael felt her in silence, supporting his wife. Valerie took a sip of champagne and smiled as if she were enjoying a private show. Helena looked around. She felt every gaze on her, every whisper, every restrained laugh, and yet she kept herself upright. The stained dress was nothing compared to the certainty that, in a matter of minutes, everything would change. Suddenly, the business reporter who was in a corner raised his eyes from his cell phone. He had heard an important detail in the conversation of two assistants. The surname Morera caused him to open his notebook and begin writing rapidly. Helena noticed this movement. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she knew this man had connected pieces that the others still didn't understand. Thomas, meanwhile, focused again on his mother. "Look at Beatrice's patience," he commented to his followers. "Anyone else in her place would have already ordered this woman out." Helena felt another vibration in her purse. This time she took it out calmly and looked at the screen. A message from Adrian. "I'm arriving. Don't move." A slight smile was drawn on her lips. She put the phone away and looked up with renewed serenity. Beatrice noticed the gesture and arched an eyebrow. "Something funny, dear?" "No," replied Helena with a quiet voice, but loaded with security. "I'm just waiting for someone." The comment sparked murmurs. Valerie rolled her eyes, certain it was an excuse. Raphael frowned, bothered by the insolence, and Thomas, curious, increased the volume of his stream. The whole hall seemed to hold its breath. No one knew what was about to happen, but everyone felt that the tension was about to break. One of the employees, a young man in a service jacket, was walking fast toward the lobby when he bumped right into Adrian Morgan. The tycoon had just arrived, impeccable in his dark, custom-made suit, a gleaming white shirt, and a blue tie that emphasized his imposing bearing. His Swiss watch shone under the dim light of the hallway. "Mr. Morgan," said the employee, almost out of breath. "Sorry, but I need to inform you of something." Adrian stopped dead, noticing the urgency in his voice. "What happened?" The employee hesitated a second before speaking. "Your wife, Mrs. Morgan, is in the hall. There was a problem. Some guests questioned her. They say she doesn't belong to the event, and someone caused a waiter to spill wine on her dress. Since then, they have been humiliating her. A dense silence followed those words. Adrian clenched his jaw. For a moment, his steps seemed to stop, as if he needed to control the rage boiling inside. Then, he nodded firmly. "Thank you for warning me." The employee stepped away nervously, while Adrian resumed his stride with determination. Inside the hall, the laughter continued floating in the air. Helena remained in the same place, firm, observed as if she were a spectacle. The Kellers, satisfied with what they considered a victory, continued in their role as relentless judges. Suddenly, the hall doors opened with a dry thud. The sound of steps on the marble mixed with the echo of a determined man. All heads turned toward the entrance. Adrian Morgan appeared in the frame of the doors with an upright posture and a fixed look. His mere presence changed the atmosphere. The murmur died down little by little until it became an expectant silence. Helena looked up and heard. A wave of relief ran through her body. She had held out alone until this moment, but Adrian's arrival was the turning point she had been waiting for. Adrian advanced between the tables with secure steps. His look settled first on Helena, then on the wine stain on her dress. He wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close to his side, as if he wanted to protect her from all the looks that had judged her. "What happened here?" he asked with a deep voice, projected so everyone would listen. No one responded immediately. Beatrice tried to maintain her composure. "Adrian, what a surprise. Your wife seems to have had a misunderstanding with security." "A misunderstanding," he repeated, frowning. Valerie intervened quickly. She arrived alone, and it didn't seem to us that she belonged on the guest list. We only wanted to make sure. Adrian pressed his lips, containing his wrath. "Ah, is that why you spilled wine over her? Why you insulted her in front of everyone?" The murmur grew again. No one dared to respond. Raphael took a step forward with the deep voice he usually used in business meetings. "Don't exaggerate, Morgan. It was an unfortunate incident, but nothing more." Adrian looked him directly. "Don't talk to me about incidents. My wife was humiliated in public, and you encouraged it." Thomas, still with his phone in hand, focused on everything nervously. The broadcast was overflowing. It exceeded 80,000 viewers, and the comments multiplied without stopping. His mocking smile had disappeared. Helena, with her head high, remained silent. She didn't need to say anything. Adrian had arrived, and his voice alone was enough to give her back the dignity they had tried to steal. A guest whispered, "This got out of control." Another replied in a low voice, "Now they really messed with the wrong person." Adrian turned his head toward the guard, who had tried to take Helena out. "Did you also participate in this?" The man swallowed hard and lowered his gaze. "Sir, I was only following orders." "Wrong orders," Adrian sentenced. Beatrice tried to regain control. "Adrian, don't be dramatic. It was only a misunderstanding. I am sure we can clarify it in private." "No," interrupted Adrian, raising his voice. "This will not be clarified in private. Right here, you mocked my wife. Right here, the truth will be known." The silence again took hold of the hall. The glasses on the tables remained untouched. No one dared to move. Helena breathed calmly, clinging to Adrian's arm. The entire hall held its breath. Adrian's presence had converted what seemed like a certain humiliation into a silent judgment against the Keller family. No one dared to speak. Only the distant murmur of the broadcast on Thomas's phone reminded them that all of this was being observed by thousands of people outside those walls. Adrian held Helena by the shoulders and raised his voice. So that there are no doubts, this woman is my wife, Helena Morgan." A murmur ran through the room like a lightning bolt. Several glasses trembled in nervous hands. Some guests opened their mouths in surprise. Others lowered their gaze, ashamed of having been witnesses to the mockery. Valerie, with her face transfigured, tried to react. "Your wife? That can't be. How is it possible that someone like her—" "Be quiet, Valerie," interrupted Adrian, with a sharp tone that echoed to the last corner. The silence became even denser. Helena remained upright, but she felt her pulse racing. For the first time tonight, it wasn't she who had to defend herself. It was Adrian who spoke for both. Raphael tried to soften the blow. "Adrian, I am certain this was a misunderstanding. No one wanted to offend you or her. It was a confusion." Adrian took a step forward with his gaze fixed on the patriarch. "Confusion? Is it confusion to spill wine over my wife's dress, to insult her in public, to try to expel her through the service door as if she were an intruder?" Raphael hesitated. Beatrice looked at him, expecting him to respond, but no word came out of his mouth. Adrian scanned the hall with his gaze. "I want someone to repeat what they said about her. Go ahead. Which of you has the courage to repeat in front of me what you said to my wife?" The silence was brutal. No one moved. Faces turned toward the floor, glasses were left on the tables, and the tension could be cut with a knife. Adrian smiled harshly. "That's what I thought. Cowards when it comes to insulting, but mute when someone faces you." Helena looked at him with pride. She knew each word of his was stabbing into the Keller's ego. Adrian spoke again with a clear voice. "Tonight you expected to announce with pride a $1 million alliance with Mendez Construction, didn't you?" Beatrice turned pale. Valerie frowned, confused. Raphael tried to keep his expression serious, though a slight tremor in his hand betrayed him. "Well, let me be clear," continued Adrian. "That deal is canceled from this exact moment." The blow was devastating. There was a murmur of surprise and incredulity. Several people in the audience exchanged open-mouthed looks. "What?" stammered Beatrice, as if she hadn't heard right. "Canceled," repeated Adrian. "There will be no business. There will be no alliance. There will be no announcement. Nothing." Valerie lost her composure. "This is absurd. You can't do this just because of a woman." Adrian interrupted her with a gesture of his hand. "Silence," he ordered. And Valerie, for the first time in a long time, obeyed. Thomas, with his cell phone still on, was trembling. The number of viewers on his stream continued rising. 100,000, 120,000, 150,000. It was like watching a fire live. Helena, in silence, observed how the Kellers' faces fell one by one. The arrogance they had shown minutes before dissolved into fear, incredulity, and shame. Adrian looked Raphael directly in the eye. "I'm going to teach you a lesson, Keller. Power is not measured in jewelry, in expensive dresses, or in looks of contempt. Real power is in knowing how to respect, and you today demonstrated that you don't know how to do it." The silence that followed was so intense that the clinking of a piece of cutlery on a table sounded like thunder. The reporter who was in the corner typed frantically on his laptop. He knew he had the news of the year in his hands. Beatrice, desperate, tried to regain control. "Adrian, please, let's talk in private. This is not the place." "No," he replied without hesitation. "Here was where you humiliated my wife, and right here, you will see the consequences." Raphael breathed with difficulty. Valerie had lost all her haughty expression and looked like a scared child. Thomas, with his cell phone hanging from his hand, could barely react. Helena looked at him, the son who had taken advantage of every second of her humiliation, and thought of how ironic it was that his own digital game was broadcasting the fall of his family. Adrian squeezed Helena's hand and took a step forward, closing his speech with a sentence that echoed in every corner of the hall. "If you think you can step on my wife without consequences, you are mistaken. You have just destroyed the only thing that kept you standing." Pausa. Let's do another joke for those who only check the comments box. Write the word "Koksinha." Those who got this far will understand the joke. Let's continue with the story. The hall seemed like a silent battlefield. No one drank. No one laughed. Everyone watched how the Keller family, so proud minutes before, began to collapse before Adrian's firm look and Helena's intact dignity. Beatrice, who had maintained her haughty posture all night, finally lost her composure. The sound of the word "canceled" still echoed in her mind. She staggered a step forward and, in a gesture unthinkable for someone who had always presented herself as the queen of those gatherings, fell to her knees before Adrian. "Please," she murmured with a broken voice. "You can't do this. Think about what it means for our families, for the foundation, for everyone who depends on us." The gesture pulled a muffled murmur from the guests. No one could believe that Beatrice Keller, the woman who had built a reputation for coldness and absolute dominance, was pleading in public. Adrian observed her coldly. "Now you understand what it means to be humiliated before everyone, don't you? That was what you did to my wife." Beatrice lowered her head, lowered her. The sound of her pearls hitting each other was the only thing that broke the silence. Valerie took a step forward, trying to regain the control her mother had lost. "This is an exaggeration, Adrian. Everything was a misunderstanding, and you are converting it into a catastrophe. There was no intention to harm anyone." Helena looked at her directly. "There was no intention?" she asked with serenity. "You called me an intruder. You mocked my dress. You feigned helping me just to spread the wine stain. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan to ridicule me." Valerie opened her mouth, but found no response. The evidence was too clear. Thomas, in a corner, still held his cell phone. The live stream reached unimaginable figures. More than 180,000 people were watching in real time the fall of his family. The young man swallowed hard, nervous. For a moment he thought about turning it off, but something inside him, perhaps the morbid pleasure of seeing how far the disaster would go, kept him connected. Adrian turned to him. "Are you still streaming, Thomas?" The young man looked at him like a child caught red-handed. I... Perfect. Adrian interrupted him. "Let the whole world see what happens when a family confuses privilege with right." Thomas lowered the phone, finally ashamed. He turned it off, but it was already too late. Hundreds of recordings circulated through the networks, impossible to stop. Raphael, desperate, tried to take a step forward. "Adrian, enough. There is no need to destroy us this way. If you want, we can renegotiate the terms of the deal. I am certain we can reach a solution." Adrian observed him calmly. "Renegotiate? You didn't understand anything, Raphael. This is not about numbers. This is about respect. And you already have nothing to offer me." The murmur again ran through the hall. Several guests began taking notes on their cell phones. Others simply observed with incredulity. Helena, standing next to Adrian, felt how the balance of power had completely inverted. From being the victim of mockery, she was now the woman for whom an entire family was on its knees. Adrian took a deep breath and spoke again, this time with a more calculated tone. But I'm still not finished. You think canceling $1 million deal is the end of everything? You are mistaken. There is something more you should know. The silence intensified. Beatrice raised her head slowly, with her makeup smeared by tears. Valerie looked at him with incredulity. Thomas was trembling. Raphael clenched his fists, trying to maintain control. Adrian let the silence linger a few more seconds before pronouncing the phrase that would change everything. Morgan Holdings owns 35% of the shares of the Keller Group. The impact was immediate. An explosive murmur ran through the room. Some glasses spilled as they fell from trembling hands. The guests looked at each other, aware of what that meant. "What did you say?" whispered Raphael with his face transfigured. "What you heard," replied Adrian firmly. "I am the largest individual shareholder of your company. That gives me enough power to call a board meeting and decide the future of all of you." Valerie took a step back, pale. "That can't be true." "Do you want to verify?" asked Adrian, taking a document from his jacket. It was a copy of the last report presented to the board of shareholders. "Here are the figures. There is nothing you can deny." The guests began to murmur with more force. The Keller's fall was no longer just social. It was corporate, legal, definitive. Beatrice pressed her hands against the floor, trying to get up. "Please, Adrian, this can be resolved. We can reach an agreement." "No," he interrupted her. "The only thing that will be resolved will be in the boardroom, and there it will be discussed whether your family deserves to continue in command of the company or not." Helena spoke then, for the first time, with a clear and firm voice, addressing everyone present. "You tried to humiliate me because you thought I was weak, because you judged my clothes, my appearance, my silence. Today, you discover that not only do I have the right to be here, but that I am above you." The murmur turned into a sepulchral silence. No one dared to contradict her. Adrian closed the scene with a sentence that chilled the Keller's blood. "On Monday, at 9 in the morning, there will be an extraordinary board meeting. Prepare yourselves, because from then on, nothing will go back to being as it was before." Helena and Adrian turned and walked toward the exit, leaving behind a hall plunged in shame. The Kellers remained motionless, incapable of reacting, and the guests, aware that they had been witnesses to a historic night, did not dare to pronounce a word. The echo of Adrian and Helena's steps upon leaving the hall remained engraved in the memory of all those present. Silence reigned for a few seconds, until the murmur exploded like a river overflowing its banks. Incredulous guests commented in low voices. Some took out their phones to send messages. Others simply stayed quiet, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The Keller family remained motionless. Beatrice was still on her knees, with her pearls twisted over her neck. Raphael had a lost look, as if he had aged 20 years in a few minutes. Valerie hugged herself, with her arrogance in pieces. Thomas, with his phone turned off in his hand, was trembling as if he had just woken up from a nightmare. But it wasn't a dream. It was the beginning of the end. The next day, the digital front pages of the major newspapers carried the same headline: "Scandal at the Keller's Gala. Morgan cancels $1 million deal and reveals shareholding control." The videos recorded by those present and Thomas's stream had gone viral in a matter of hours. It was no longer thousands who had seen it, but millions. Public indignation was immediate. The humiliating treatment of Helena became a symbol of the excesses of an elite disconnected from reality. On social media, hashtags like #TheKellersFall and #RespectIsPower became trending. The Kellers tried to react. Valerie published a statement speaking of misunderstandings and errors of perception, but the text was received with mockery and criticism. Beatrice, too proud to apologize, kept silent, although her public image was destroyed. The one who suffered most was Thomas. Upon realizing that he himself had broadcast his family's humiliation, he tried to record an apology video for his followers. He sat before the camera with swollen eyes and spoke for 10 minutes about how sorry he was, but the comments had no mercy. Too late. Thank you for showing who you really are. Karma broadcast live. The video became a new reason for mockery. Thomas's account, which had been his pride, was forever marked as the platform from which the Kellers destroyed themselves. The following Monday, just as Adrian had announced, the board of the Keller Group met in an emergency session. The atmosphere was tense. The shareholders, worried about the company's reputation and the loss of the deal with Mendez Construction, demanded explanations. Adrian, with Helena by his side, presented a detailed report. He explained how the Kellers' public conduct had damaged the company's image, and, with it, investor confidence. He argued that keeping them in leadership represented a risk to the company's future. The vote was overwhelming. The Keller family lost control. Raphael was relegated to an honorary position with no decision-making power. Beatrice was out of the foundation. Valerie was suspended indefinitely from the public relations directorship, and Thomas, with his social media background, was removed from any responsibility. Adrian did not take direct command. In his place, he proposed a renewed board with experienced executives and, for the first time in the company's history, with women and young leaders who represented the diversity that was so lacking. Helena was present at this vote, and although she did not seek a position, she became the moral voice of the meeting. The following months confirmed the change. The press followed every step. What had begun as a social scandal turned into an example of how power could change hands overnight. Helena, who that night had been ridiculed for her sober dress and the wine stain, became a symbol of dignity. Her image circulated in interviews and reports that highlighted how she had resisted without yielding until the truth came to light. The Kellers, on the other hand, lived through a social collapse. Beatrice disappeared from high society events. Raphael barely left his house. Valerie was seen trying to organize small private gatherings, but no one wanted to be associated with her surname. And Thomas, incapable of recovering his credibility on the networks, ended up closing his account. 1 year later, the same hall at the Pierre opened its doors again for a gala, this time organized by an independent foundation. Among the guests of honor was Helena Morgan. Her dress, again black, this time bore an elegant design with discreet silver details. She walked securely, with a serene smile, while the chandeliers reflected the light on her. Those present rose from their seats when she was introduced. Now there were no mockeries, no laughter, no malicious murmurs. Only respect. Helena looked around. She remembered the night they had tried to humiliate her, the wine stain, the laughter, the insults. And she also remembered the moment Adrian entered the hall to give her back her dignity before everyone. The night at the Pierre did not take long to cross borders. What began as a local scandal became international news. In a matter of hours, the headlines appeared in every corner of the world. In London, an economic newspaper opened its cover with the phrase, "When power is not enough, the fall of the Kellers." In Paris, a society magazine dedicated several pages to describing the contrast between Helena Morgan's dignity and the Keller family's arrogance. In New York, A television program broadcast fragments of the viral videos, commenting on the lesson that night left the business world. Never underestimate someone by their appearance. The incident was baptized by the press as the Night of Spilled Wine, a symbol that represented much more than an accident. It was evidence of how a simple act of contempt could trigger a corporate earthquake. In the corporate world, the impact was immediate. Executives of multinational companies discussed the topic in private meetings. Some shareholders began to demand more rigorous diversity and inclusion policies from their boards, using the Keller case as a warning. "If this happened to them, it can happen to anyone," said an investor during a conference. Meanwhile, Mendez Construction, freed from the deal with the Kellers, announced weeks later a new joint project with Morgan Holdings. The contract was even more ambitious than the previous one and promised historic benefits. The message was clear. The Kellers had lost not just a business, but an opportunity that would never return. Adrian and Helena began receiving invitations to speak at leadership forums. At each event, the organizers asked Helena to share her experience. She accepted with serenity, always leaving the same message. "I did not raise my voice. I did not need to demonstrate anything with shouts or insults. I stood my ground, just that. And sometimes that is enough." Her words were quoted in articles and conferences. Some began calling her the woman of firm silence. Meanwhile, the Kellers' fall continued. Valerie, incapable of enduring the looks of contempt, tried to move to another city, hoping to start over. However, her surname preceded her. Invitations to social events stopped arriving, and on more than one occasion she was received with sarcastic comments. Her spark had gone out. Thomas received offers for interviews in national media. He believed it would be an opportunity to explain his version, but soon discovered that all the proposals had a mocking tone. They wanted him to speak as the son who broadcast live the ruin of his family. Humiliated, he rejected each offer and ended up closing his social media account. That which had been his weapon of exhibition became his condemnation. Beatrice, who before dominated every hall with her mere presence, stopped appearing in public. In her house, the pearls she had always worn remained stored in a drawer. Raphael, incapable of enduring the press pressure and the loss of influence, sold several properties to maintain a merely dignified lifestyle. The couple who for decades had represented the top of society was reduced to a shadow of what they once were. While the Kellers fell, the Morgans ascended. Adrian reinforced his position in the financial world, and Helena became a reference for ethics and dignity. Her image appeared in national magazines, not as a tycoon's wife, but as a figure with her own voice. What happened that night taught me that respect does not depend on titles or fortunes, she said in an interview. Respect is demonstrated in every act, even in the smallest details. When 2 years later, Adrian and Helena attended a forum at the UN headquarters in the US on business ethics. The auditorium was full of leaders from all over the world. Upon being introduced, Helena walked to the stage with the same serenity as that night at the hotel. Her dress was simple, of a sober blue that highlighted the brightness of her eyes. The public received her with warm applause. She took the microphone and looked at those present. "I am not a businesswoman or a politician," she began. "I am a woman who one night was judged by how she dressed, for being alone, for not appearing like what they expected of me. That night they tried to humiliate me, but the only thing they achieved was demonstrating to the world that respect is not bought with money, nor dressed in diamonds. Respect is earned with dignity." The silence in the room was absolute. Each word seemed to weigh more than the previous one. "And I learned something else," she added. "True power is not in destroying, but in building. It is in using every opportunity to do what is right and correct, even when no one else expects it. The auditorium exploded in applause. Adrian, sitting in the first row, smiled with pride. He knew that this woman, the same one who had supported in silence the contempt of an entire family, had transformed into a global symbol of resistance and respect. That night at the Pierre had been the end of the Kellers, but also the beginning of something larger. A movement that reminded everyone that dignity, when defended with firmness, can topple empires and build legacies. Now, I want to know your opinion. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment below and rate it from 0 to 10. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. See you in the next one. This story teaches us that it is never too late to discover that true strength is not in money or power, but in the dignity and respect we offer others. Helena showed that sometimes the greatest victory is simply staying on your feet when everyone expects you to fall. If this story touched your heart as much as ours, don't forget to like and share. Your participation helps us continue telling stories that inspire and transform lives. Tell us in the comments your name and what city you are watching us from. Thank you for the company, and until next time.